Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar on the Junkipedia disinformation tool and the updated Census Bureau communications plan. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy during this difficult time. And as you know, Asian Americans Advancing Justice is working to ensure a full and accurate count of our communities in the 2020 census. And as a national hub, we're working to develop curriculum and materials to support your Get Out the Count work, including fact sheets, toolkits, webinars, social media graphics, translated materials, and more. And today we're excited to dive deeper into how organizations can use the Algorithmic Transparency Institute at the National Conference on Citizenship's disinformation tool, Junkipedia, in their census work. And we'll also be discussing the Census Bureau's new updated communications plans, how their advertising campaign has expanded, especially with additional Asian language coverage, and been adapted to reflect the post-COVID-19 media environment. And as you may know, this webinar is the 19th installment of our monthly census webinar series, which we launched in August 2018. And if you missed our previous webinars and want to tune in, you can access them with the links on these two slides. And we're covering two really exciting topics today in one webinar, and we anticipate this webinar will run approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes, including Q&A. We have a packed agenda today, and we're really excited to be welcoming 4 speakers. First, we have Maria Almeida Malagon, who is the program manager for the 2020 Census Communications Campaign at the U.S. Census Bureau. She specializes in working with federal agencies to create award-winning social marketing campaigns. Maria focuses in developing integrated communications programs that unify different influential areas of government to create change within federal entities. As the program manager of the 2020 Census Communications Campaign, she is responsible for the creative direction, message development, and program management of the campaign. And we're excited to have a team from the National Conference on Citizenship here with us today. Cameron Hickey is the project director for Algorithmic Transparency at the National Conference on Citizenship. He leads an effort to develop methodologies and tools for collecting and analyzing data to increase transparency about how large digital platforms impact society. We're also really honored to have Caitlin Dowling, who is the project manager for Algorithmic Transparency at the National Conference on Citizenship, and also Krishma Shah, who is the Census Disinformation Project Coordinator at the Algorithmic Transparency Institute at the National Conference on Citizenship. We will have Q&A in the middle and at the end of this webinar. And during Q&A, you can use the chat box or the questions box to send your question, or you can raise your hand on GoToWebinar to have your line unmuted so you can ask the question yourself. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please also use the chat box or questions box to send us your questions. And I will repeat this again once we start Q&A. And this webinar is recorded, and we will send out the recording and a presentation after the webinar. If you haven't done so already, please check out our census website at countusin2020.org for all of our webinars and accompanying summary blogs. This website also hosts our toolkit, fact sheets, partner resources, and more. And we also have a COVID-19 page with the latest information on changing Census Bureau operations and updated field guidance. And you can find information on Census Bureau operations and the latest changes announced translated on the different language pages under our main resources. Questions? Advancing Justice AHAC and our partner API Vote are ready to take your census questions. So call our hotline at 844-2020 API or 844-202-0274 for answers to your questions in English and multiple Asian languages. I just want to note that this hotline is strictly for answering questions regarding the census, such as how can I fill out the census online, or what languages is the paper form available in. This hotline is not meant for filling out the census. So if you wish to fill out the census on the phone, please call the Census Bureau's questionnaire assistance phone lines. And we also have a toolkit with sample posts and shareable graphics if you'd like to help us promote the hotline on your social media accounts. And these are examples of some of the translated images that we have that are included in the toolkit. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Maria, who is with the U.S. Census Bureau.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to spend this afternoon with the Asian American Justice Center. As you probably know, our communications campaign for the 2020 census have had a very strong focus on Asian Americans. We have been working with TDW, our Asian American contractor, on reaching the Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Filipino, and Japanese audiences. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about what our campaign have been doing the last couple of months, especially in response to the COVID-19 emergency. Next slide, please. So here, I want to show a little bit of the changes that we have had on the 2020 census operations. As you can see, we had to change our self-response and non-response follow-up phases. Pretty much our self-response which for the communications campaign environment was the motivation phase, was running originally between March 12 and July 31st. And we decided to move it from March 12 to October 31st. Our website and our lines are going to be open to the public, and also we will be receiving paper questionnaires until October 31st. We are going, instead of starting non-response follow-up as we had planned on May 13, we're starting on mid-August to give the public enough time to conduct their self-response. We are really giving as much time as possible to the public. Also because some of our field operations that are related to people receiving their questionnaires in other ways than mail were delayed due to the COVID-19 emergency. We have our area census offices and local census offices closed until about mid to late May. It depends on the area. We have area offices that are still opening. So on that affects certain operations like update leave and update enumerating, which are operations that we send enumerators to the field before non-response follow-up starts. So with that in mind, we decided to delay non-response follow-up until late in the summer into the fall. So and also with that in mind, we have been adjusting our communications campaign for this. Next slide, please. So in terms of reaching Asian Americans communities, we have been doing a mix across our program. As you probably have heard, this is a campaign that is almost $1 billion campaign. We do paid advertising, national and local partnerships, public relations, media relations, social media, digital media with our website, the statistics in schools programs, etc. So mainly, we have probably used every single section of our campaign to reach the Asian American community. We have definitely put a strong focus on paid advertising, the work with partner organizations, and media relations. Next slide, please. With the National Partnership Program, as you probably know, we have been engaging several national partners to work with us. They have been very, very generous with their time and with their resources, encouraging their membership and also their different chapters in working with us and spread the word of the 2020 census. You can see some of our partners here, and you guys are also excellent partners of ours. You can see here we are working with Lyft, we are working with the Human Rights Campaign, with Sesame Street. Just very recently this week, we have started working with Target, who very generously put a note on the 2020 census on this week's ads. Next week we're going to be working with Starbucks, who is going to advertise us on their app. So we are very, very grateful of all these opportunities that our almost 1,000 national partners have provided us. Next slide, please. Also, we have been working with local partners through our community partnerships and engagement program. We pretty much have at this moment almost 400,000 local partners across the country. We have churches, schools, local governments, local nonprofits, health clinics, libraries, everyone coming together to spread the word of the 2020 census at the community level in a way that I think is probably one of the most effective ways to reach the public, which is through trusted voices in their community, particularly for hard to count populations who suffer certain level of language isolation. It's great to have that trusted voice in their community, telling them that they should fill the census. Sometimes a pastor, a principal, a nurse in their local clinic can do much more than what we can do with paid advertising, because people really trust them. They are talking to them in their language. So definitely one of our strongest tools for reaching people during a decennial environment. Next slide, please. So right now, our response rate is 61.6%. I think today was 61.7%. We are about 1% higher than we were expecting. You can see in that map how it's the response rate moving at the moment. Some of our stronger places are Minnesota, Wisconsin, like several areas of the Midwest. You can see in the map certain the numbers look a little bit behind for Alaska, New Mexico, and Puerto Rico. That is explained through what I told you previously about certain operations, update, leave, and update enumerate. We need to send enumerators out to leave the packages to the households, and unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we had to stop those operations. We just restarted them a couple of weeks ago. So we are still dropping packages in neighborhoods, mostly across those 3 places. That's why you see a little bit of a lag over there with those self-responses. If you are not familiar, the page is right there. You can go to our response rates pages, and you can not only look at response rates by state, but you can also look at them about like in certain other categories like county and city level. So if you are interested in seeing how it's your particular area working on right now, how there are response rates and what kind of things you could do to help, please go to this website. I think it's one of the most helpful tools. I have been using it quite a lot over the last couple of months. Next slide, please. So when we were planning the campaign, we always talk about our campaign optimization area of the campaign, and people could not really see it. Like, I think for everyone, it was very clear what paid advertising is or what social media is. It was very tangible for them. Campaign optimization, it was more of an abstract concept. I kept saying that we will be using data to make decisions every day. And pretty much that's what we have been doing. On this screen, you can see some of the data visualizations that we use every day as a team to make decisions on how to respond to the campaign on a very timely basis. And also we use that not only to know where our response rates are lagging or where we have I don't know, a social media rumor or something that is not helping with the response rate in that area, but also we compare and see what communications techniques have worked in other areas that are similar that we can use on that particular place. For example, we can make decisions about adding paid advertising and what kind of paid advertising. Do we pick radio? Do we pick TV? Do we pick social media? Or on the other hand, maybe what that community needs is more local partnerships, more work from our partnership specialists. So that's what we have been doing with data with campaign optimization. Funny enough that we did a lot of crisis communications and risk exercises related to our campaign optimization efforts before we implemented the campaign. But we never thought that we would be implementing the campaign in the middle of a pandemic. So we rehearsed a lot, but this year came with its own challenges, and our exercises help, but definitely it have been special. It have been something that we have been putting even more resources than we thought that we will have to. Next slide, please. So here you can see what have been a summary of the challenges that we have had. Pretty much, COVID-19 is what have been on the mind of people in this country or around the world over the last 3 to 4 months. So there had been very difficult for us to do what we would usually do. We will have a lot of space in the media. We will be on all morning shows, for example, nightly news. In a normal census year, census takes a lot of attention. Not this year, or not at the beginning. Also, we have very limited resources. A lot of what we do with national and local partners is events, both at the national level and smaller events around the country, like fairs, like health fairs, or like we will go to PTA meetings or church services. None of that was active. They are not active. So we didn't have those opportunities. We have reduced earned media opportunities, as I said. We have to pause a lot of this social media advertising the week of June 1st, because of course there was a national online movement related to Black Lives Matter, and we wanted to be respectful of that. We have to change the messages across audiences because people were not really thinking on census in the same way on a normal census year. So, and obviously, as I mentioned before, we have to close or reduce capacity a lot on our area census offices. The mail outs start being delayed because, of course, the work of the USPS was also delayed. Our census questionnaire assistance center had to reduce capacity at some point also to implement social distance guidance, so there were not as many phone operators. So we have an extreme environment of challenges here, but we were looking for creative ways to respond to this. So here on the next slide, you can see some of what we did. First of all, we expand the campaign. We put more dollars on the campaign, particularly on the media buys, and start adding DMAs, and especially we were adding DMAs for our media purchases for Hispanic, African American, Asian, and also for the diverse audience. We increased our impressions on pretty much all the areas of the media. We increased what we were doing with paid search. Like we realized that a lot of people were looking information, for example, on Google, so we really needed to increase our advertising dollars on paid search. We also came with some ideas that originally we didn't have. We did a motivation launch heavy up, in which the week of March 23rd, we really invested more on the campaign, on paid advertising, and also we did a heavy up around Census Day on April 1st. Also, we did what we call the April and May surges, which is putting advertising dollars that we were not planning on those 2 months. Like, as I say, we had to extend the motivation campaign, the motivation phase of the campaign. So we were not really planning to do as much paid advertising on May as we end up doing, but we continue doing it. We increase the media purchases, and also we start doing more innovative placements instead of only doing TV, or what we would do normally. Usually you will purchase for a campaign like this TV on prime time, but people were watching more morning news or the evening news. So we started to purchase around that. We start doing a lot of media places in more creative places like gas stations, pharmacies, or grocery stores, particularly ethnic grocery stores. We start purchasing a lot of media on Asian grocery stores, for example. Now, so people were ordering a lot of pizza, so we start advertising on pizza boxes, which proved to be very effective. Next slide, please. So here you can see on these slides a little bit of the examples of what we changed in terms of the creative. Pretty much for creative, we came with 3 different new concepts around the COVID-19 crisis. And this is because a lot of our advertising could be seen as tone deaf during the COVID-19 crisis. There were definitely not social distancing on our ads. People were not using PPE. We were talking about all benefits to the community that were not really what people were expecting. So we decided to come with 3 new concepts. One of them was recovery, which was something about on the lines of when things are eventually going back to normal, and while we wait for going back to normal, please fill your census. We did first responders, which was on the lines of everyone was wondering how to help first responders, and filling your census is a way to help first responders, because that's the way that they will get more resources for their work. And safety first, which show people in different social distancing situation, and showing that while you're social distancing, you can also answer your census. So pretty much we came with different executions of those 3 topics on our different audiences. Next slide, please. And here you can see how we did it for the Asian languages, and it was adapted to the 5 main Asian languages for the campaign. Next slide. Here you have some of the examples. I don't know if you guys would like to play one of them as part of the presentation. That's up to you. I know that takes a little bit of time.
We can try it. Let me see if I can click on one of them. Yeah. Oops. I'm not sure if the link is working. Let's see. Give me 1 second.
Okay, well, if not, I can send the links later.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So next slide. So in summary, we increased the total paid media budget from $240 million to $323 million during this period. We did, as I say, additional motivation phase and Census Week paid media. We established like a longer motivation period because there's a longer enumeration period. We have expanded the languages, which is going to come on a topic for my next slide. And we have been doing a lot of hyperlocal. We have invested also in doing more media outreach with appropriate media across 90 markets, and that's also a lot of in language media that we have been reaching, so we can expand the amount of interviews, being in a lot of TV, radio, and print stories, so people can get also the census message from a trusted voice in terms of the news media that they consume in their community. And we keep doing these data-driven decisions. Actually, right now we are on the developing the plans to expand the campaign through the summer and the fall, and it's all based on our data and the research that we're constantly conducting. Next slide, please. So here you see the expansion in terms of languages. This is something that a lot of stakeholders have been asking us for a while to do. And what we did is that we keep the 13 main languages of the campaign, which is the ones that you are seeing on the dark green on the left side of the screen. However, as you probably know, we have what we call language guides in 59 languages. And also our website pretty much is not completely translated, but there is availability of 59 languages in the website with the reading guides, with video guides to help people to fill the form even if they don't have the form in their language. What we did is that we work with our contractor team YNR to expand the campaign as possible to those other 46 languages. And right now, if you can see, the ones on the light green are the ones that we were able to find some sort of media platform, being paid search, digital media, or print media, in which we were able to advertise. So we were very fortunate to be able to expand to a lot of languages. Especially, we have been able to expand to a lot of Asian languages. I know a lot of people have interest in us expanding to Pan-Asian languages, that we were able to do that. As you can see over there, we have expanded to include Thai, Nepali, Hmong, Indonesian in these particular platforms, paid search, digital, and print. So it's not perfect, but definitely something that help us to reach those communities. Next slide, please. So here is the investment by audience. Pretty much, as you can see, for the 2010 census, we invested $14.2 million in the Asian advertising through the Asian community. In 2020, we have invested almost $24 million, and that is only for the paid media buy. That does not include the work that we have been doing in terms of developing promotional materials for the Asian audiences, social media posts, work with the national and local partners, etc. Next slide, please. So here you can see a summary of the developments since December. Everything that I have been saying during the presentation, if summarized here, gives you a really good snapshot if you want to go back and take a look. Next slide, please. So here is what we are doing next. So that's what it keeps me working really hard on this campaign these days. We have been extending the motivation campaign, as I mentioned, to the months of June and July and early August. We are coming with what we call regional surges over the next couple of weeks. And as you may know, the Census Bureau have 6 regional offices. We are working with these regional offices to understand what are the areas that they think that are problematic in terms of response rates and with audiences. Every 2 weeks, we are going to work with 2 regional offices, and we are going to put a special attention to them. We are helping them with earned media. We are doing what we call a heavy up of earned media, in which we are going to work with our public relations contractor to really get interviews on those local media, especially in language media that they are interested. We are going to work with them to develop a strong amount of local partnerships and local events that we can work with our partnership specialists. And we are going to increase paid advertising in that particular area for that period of time. And we will be using, again, media entities that are what the hard to count of that particular community needs. So we are definitely keep doing paid search, social media, digital media, but also we will be doing more radio, more outdoor. Now that people are going outside, really getting in their cars or getting in public transportation, we are going to focus on those. Not that much TV, but still some TV. So that's what we are planning for the next couple of weeks. For the reminder phase, we are now planning to do a national media buy for the first 2 weeks of August to really let people know that the enumerators will be coming, that they will see people in their communities. But after that, we are going to work with what we call the workload numbers for the non-response follow-up, which is the areas in which we really need more, more reminder advertising, because more enumerators will be going over there because their response rates were lower. So we will be working with those particular areas for the reminder phase, and that's mid-August to late October. For the reminder phase, we will continue doing a lot of press work, but especially local partnerships. We are probably finishing our paid advertising the last week of September and concentrate our communications efforts on October in doing only local partnerships and end with the campaign. Next slide, please. So how you can help. You can participate in our response rate challenge. That's something that we were really looking forward to do more at the national level, starting in April. And unfortunately, with COVID-19, all the plans that we have that were very much having big media blitz with mayors from different cities challenging one another. Well, that was left in the past. Obviously, that was left in the planning. However, we think that still you can challenge other community. You can challenge, I don't know, if you represent a chapter of an organization, perhaps challenge the chapter of the organization in another city. Promote incentives and rewards for participating and partner with local businesses to incentivize response. What a lot of organizations or local governments do is to get, like, I don't know, a pizza shop to give free pizza if they win the challenge, or activities like that. So discounts, coupons, etc. So if you can do that, that would be great. Next slide. So you can use our response rate websites, 2020census.gov/response rates. As I mentioned, it's a website that I continuously use because I really think it's great in terms of tracking how your community is going. Next slide, please. Also, you can talk to the people in your community about how our data is safe, how census takers are taken out under Title 13. They are not supposed to spread any information from our from the public. So that's something that you could do a lot. And if you by any chance see any rumors, any social media hoaxes and things like that, please contact us at rumors@census.gov. Next slide, please. And that's it. Thank you for inviting me today. And now I'm open for questions.
Maria, thank you for walking us through the plan and all the changes that have been made. So we are going to start our first Q&A session. As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, you can use the chat box or the questions box to type in your question, or you can raise your hand to have your line unmuted and ask the question yourself. And again, this webinar is recorded, so everyone will receive a copy of the presentation as well as a link to the recording. So I will turn it over to my colleague, Brima, who will be facilitating Q&A.
Thanks, Bessie, and thank you so much, Maria, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So So the first question we have is from Jin Bay. And Jin, I can unmute you if you need to elaborate more on your question. Can we get access to assets used to advertise in the light green languages on slide 16? And I can go back to the slide as well for folks to see. Oh, there it was.
Yeah, in terms of our assets, there is there is access to our assets on the YouTube page. However, we are not supposed to use paid advertising assets other than the for paid advertising, because there are certain contracts, SAG fees, etc. Actors in particular are very protected under their union, so we are not supposed to use any assets where we have the actors from other things other than what we already have programmed. However, on 2020census.gov, you can find public service announcements. We have public service announcements on the 5 Asian languages. I think they're all radio scripts that can be used for anything that you want. There's also in our promotional materials, which is 2020census.gov/partners. There are all the promotional materials, and you can search by language, and those can be used. And there are a lot of assets on that page too.
So, this is Jin. Nice to speak to you.
And
thank you for the great presentation. I'm in Queens, New York, and there are many languages here that would help us target some of the very low responding neighborhoods in Queens. So I was wondering if there was any way that I could help uplift the messages if they're already out online in some way. That's basically why I wondered if there was access to assets.
Yeah.
I had a look at the page that you've mentioned, and I don't believe that these are up.
So let me find the information for the New York regional office, because I have been working a lot with them, because they are doing a lot of great work. Obviously, New York have been one of the places where we are lagging response rates because the crisis. So I would like to give you the information for the regional office.
Okay, so I am already in touch with them, so I'll ask them directly. Thank you so much. I wasn't aware of this.
They have their own materials, and they have been developing certain things on these languages. But as I say, on the website on 2020census.gov/partners, you will find a lot of materials over there that you can use. The partnership specialists over there can help you with that. And I know they have been developing their own things on additional languages. So there's a lot that we are doing with New York that I think you will have access.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Jen and Maria. We have 2 more questions for you, Maria, before we let you go. So the second question is, for the regional surges, will the Census Bureau be working with the 6 multi-state census regions or something more local like the ACOs?
Yeah, so we are going to work with the census regions, but they are going to guide us to work with the ACO. So we definitely will be working with certain ACOs in particular, or certain partnership specialists in particular, if that particular area is lagging a lot of responses. So what we are trying is to follow the lead of the regional directors and their teams in which are the areas that they really think that we need to work with them.
Great, thank you. And then the last question we have is from Gloria Pinagos. I need advice about how to motivate undocumented people to fill out the census. I've already explained things about confidentiality, but people are still afraid. What else can I do?
Wow, that's a big question. That's a question that probably I think about every day. I try to explain to people, I do a lot of work, obviously, because being a Spanish speaker, I do a lot of work with the Hispanic community in Hispanic media, and I try to emphasize on the message that there's no reason to be afraid of the census. There are a lot of penalties for our staff to getting involved in any way that could cause harm to any of our respondents. But in fact, what people should be afraid is on losing what they gain with the census, on losing their fair share of their almost $700 billion a year that are sent to communities across the country based on census data. To be afraid of losing the right representation that right now, thanks to the census data, they will have enough representatives and the right representatives for their communities. The fact that census data is used to enforce voting rights and civil rights laws, and losing that is what our communities should be afraid. So it's a difficult question, but that's the message that I try to spread all the time.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. We really appreciate having you on here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It has been a pleasure to spend this part of my afternoon with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for everyone who's on, you will see Maria's contact information at the end of the presentation. So if you have any follow-up questions for Maria or any of our other speakers, you'll be able to contact them directly as well. So without further ado, I want to kick it over to our next speakers. We are so honored to have Cameron, Caitlin, and Karishma here with the National Conference on Citizenship.
Cameron, are you able to unmute yourself?
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Maria, for that incredibly detailed and valuable presentation. I think it's, as we've followed what's happened in the census and the evolution of things over time, I think it's really valuable to understand the evolution. And so I know that everyone else on here will find it beneficial as I did. So I want to jump right in here and introduce you to the project that we have. I'm going to run briefly through a discussion of the challenge that we face, what that challenge looks like, and what we think we can do about it, and then do a very brief demonstration of what can be done, and then invite all of you to actually participate a little bit. So if we could kick off the presentation. Oh, and look at that, we have, our fonts are funny. So we are in the midst of an infodemic, right? In addition to the pandemic that we are facing a flood of mis and disinformation. This is not new. We've seen it since 2016 and before, but it is ever present at the moment. Next slide. What we know is that viral misinformation is contagious and it is dangerous. Just like this virus that we are physically concerned about, mis and disinformation present a similar risk. We can keep going. Next. So we use a lot of different terms to talk about what problematic content is, right? We can say misinformation, we can say disinformation, we talk about rumors. I personally like to talk about junk news, conspiracy theories, hate, whatever form problematic content comes in, it all misleads. It's all damaging to our civic discourse. And so we need to be vigilant about all of it and not focus so much on what the motivation of the person who was spreading it is, or the very detailed specifics of it. If it's misleading, it's problematic. I mean, we can keep going. There are many different facets of our society which are at risk. We're going to focus primarily on the census today, but I think it's important to recognize that everything happens in a larger context, right? So within the context of the pandemic that is far from over, mis and disinformation represents a risk to our health and safety. It produces quite a few different kinds of scams, and varying forms of problematic content related to the pandemic are fueling xenophobia. These are considerable challenges. We'll talk about a few of them in a minute. In the context of the census, there are a number of things that are at risk, right? First and foremost is an undercount, right? An inaccurate count. The thing I think we're all most concerned about. We want everyone to be counted so that we have a complete and accurate count so that representation and federal money are apportioned fairly and justly. And any kind of mis or disinformation that suppresses people's interest in or comfort with getting counted will produce an undercount. Further, mis and disinformation can compromise the integrity of the data that the census does collect. So people can be directed to respond in a different way than is legitimate. People can be directed to respond in ways that pollute the quality of the data that the system collects. Bad information that may not be spread intentionally, but is nonetheless misleading people can have people mail in a form and try and fill out online, et cetera. There's been a lot of misinformation that we've seen recently about whether or not the census ended on April 1st, for example. So there's other ways that the data quality of the census can be compromised by mis and disinformation. Finally, cybersecurity, the risks of phishing attacks and other ways of stealing your personal information can create risks to individuals. Moving beyond the census and just thinking about more broadly the impacts that we're seeing to mis and disinformation, voter suppression, the manipulation of our media, and potential foreign interference are risks that we see ever present. They are not new, but they are present here and now today and will be through November. And as we see the non-response follow-up heading through the fall, then the apportionment process continuing on through early next year, the census and the 2020 election are going to happen essentially concurrently. And so misinformation that travels between both of them or is responsive to whatever the main news event is of the day that could impact our participation in either the census or the 2020 election is of significant risk. So understanding that these set of critical civic institutions and the way that our society functions are at risk, what does problematic content look like? And we can go to the next slide now. It comes in many different forms. So we've seen a lot of problematic content related to the census in particular that is about fear mongering. Many of you may be familiar with these hoax. They've been debunked many times. We put that red word hoax over the top of them because we want you to be clear that this is not a legitimate piece of information, but we'll talk about it anyway. This is called the home affairs hoax. For anyone who hasn't heard about it, there is a false rumor spreading, and it's important to stress this is a false rumor. It has never happened, but there is a rumor that has spread throughout many different communities that people are pretending to be census workers, and that those people who pretend to be census workers will try and rob your home. There are no actual legitimate reports of that happening. Nonetheless, versions of this rumor, versions of this hoax have spread across different languages, getting translated, photoshopped, even evolving and adapting to be related to contact tracers or other medical or healthcare workers related to coronavirus. This is spreading and continues to spread. In addition, and we can go to the next slide now, we've seen rumors that the Census Bureau will share citizenship data with ICE. The image on the right here is one that appeared in a few different places in California. It's a flyer saying, don't share your information with the census, they'll share it with ICE. We've seen variations on this for quite a while. These are designed to produce fear within our communities. These are designed to either suppress people's interest in responding to the census, sometimes even with the best of intentions, right? Perhaps the first person that shared this home affairs hoax did so maliciously, but then everyone else that saw it shared it because they wanted to alert their friends and family, right? You all may even have heard that there are risks of census rumors and hoaxes, and so you have actively, or I should say proactively, shared those alerts with your community because you want other people to be vigilant. This is a risk in and of itself when the information itself is false. So it's critically important that we are investigating the kinds of information that we share with others, because it's our natural tendency to want to help and provide good information to other people. So we have to be really responsible about how we share it. And these are both examples that we've seen specifically to the census that generate a real risk. We can go to the next slide. And I'll try and jump through these pretty quickly. The 2020 elections, we see lots of mis and disinformation spreading all of the time. Misinformation about how voting is going to take place, the risks and legitimacy of mail-in voting, for example. We can keep going to the next slide. We've even seen questioning the legitimacy of the mail-in vote and the sort of backlash against it, which argues we can mail in the census, we can mail in a ballot, arguing it's legitimate to do both, but that also creates a risk in that some people may think the opposite. Wait, if I'm skeptical of mail-in votes, should I be skeptical of the census? Any of these messages which skirt the line between legitimately being malicious disinformation, but nonetheless can invoke fear, are problematic. And we see in some communities spreading mis and disinformation around the election that links various pandemics that we've seen in the past to election years, which is coincidence, but nonetheless can stoke fears of potential conspiracy theories. We can go on to the next slide. There are lots of different ways that problematic content designed to make people fearful can put the legitimacy of our discourse at risk. And then I'll just briefly touch on in the context of the pandemic itself, we see lots and lots of junk science that around the cures, around the vaccine, around various ways that we can try and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 that are not legitimate, that are not well-founded in science, that get spread virally, that produce a cascade of mis and disinformation that puts people's health at risk. If people think that they can protect themselves from coronavirus by drinking hot tea or spraying their throat with a hot blow dryer, they're not protecting themselves and they're putting themselves at risk. Next slide. And actually, we're just going to jump ahead to the next one after this, which is conspiracy theories. What we've seen across every subject area, from the census to the pandemic to the election, is conspiracy theories. I'm not going to go into the very specific ones that are illustrated here, because frankly, they're quite toxic. But vaccine conspiracy theories, boogeymen, the rich and powerful trying to control us, anything that relates to trading on open questions that try to answer things that we don't understand, using far out wacko conspiracy theories, spread virally on the internet really effectively. We're seeing those grow rapidly at the moment in the context of both the pandemic and the election. And we think that there is a significant risk to conspiracy theories in the future as we mobilize 500,000 people to go out and knock on doors for the census, right? Because of the delay in the non-response follow-up enumeration, we have not seen a whole lot of census mis and disinformation, but we all know that that is likely to change as lots and lots of people enter our communities and start knocking on doors and raising all kinds of questions with the backdrop of the pandemic, the upcoming election, and the significant unrest and frustration that people are feeling around this country in response to police brutality. And so conspiracy theories grow and fester in a low information environment. And when we start to see those census takers coming out, we are very concerned about the spread of conspiracy theories. So let's go on to the next slide. So given that there is a lot of problematic content out there, what can we do to turn back the tide? Critically, this starts with monitoring. This starts with looking at the spaces where you are consuming information and your friends and family and community are consuming information, and actively observing what's happening. Engage the other people that you communicate with to be vigilant as well, to be skeptical of what they're seeing, to be concerned about whether or not something is being shared in a way that is designed to make you fearful, for example, or that potentially might mislead you inadvertently, and so to be vigilant and skeptical about what you're seeing. Then, when you see things that you think are problematic, submit that content. We're going to talk in just a minute about how you can submit that content to us. Submit that content to the platform that we've developed, because we are working with various partners, including AAJC, including Census Counts, the Leadership Conference, and by extension, the Census Bureau, and in other contexts, efforts focused on voter suppression and voter protection, in order to try and understand and mitigate the impact of problematic content. And the second point here is really important. If you aren't totally sure the information is mis or disinformation, report it anyway. Putting it in front of other people in order to get a sort of consensus understanding of what kinds of problematic content people are seeing is critically important. And if you don't report it and we never know that that you saw it, nothing can be done about it. And then finally, when you know something is problematic, actively engaging with your community to respond to it is critical, right? So when you know something is false, thinking about the most productive and pro-social ways to respond to your community. That doesn't necessarily mean, for example, pointing a finger at someone and saying, that's absurd, you're a fool, this is not the right information. That frequently drives people further into their corner and makes them more likely to become defensive and not want to engage with you on what you're on problematic content they might be sharing. Frequently, we advise to share credible information where possible. If you see someone sharing something that's legitimate, you don't even have to counter it directly. You can just share more credible information and say, I actually found this, which I think I trust, and so it's worth everyone knowing about it. And we can go on to the next slide. So what are we looking for when we're talking about problematic content? We're talking about anything that plays on your fear and emotions, right? Things that are designed to scare you into changing your behavior, things that make you fearful, furious, or self-righteous, that make you think, I must share this. Whenever that happens, take a beat and think, should I actually do this? Is this something that's legitimate? Did I double check that the person who shared it is someone that I trust? Did I double check that somebody else hasn't already debunked this? Did I double check that, for example, maybe this is just old, outdated, and no longer legitimate? Then another area that we're really concerned about is conspiracy theories. I mentioned those earlier. I'll sort of point to some specific ideas about how you think about this. Stories that blame a boogeyman, stories that weave complex plots that are, open-ended questions that say, why is this happening? With spooky music or spooky imagery. Anything that tries to take something that may be frustrating or upsetting and provide a far-fetched explanation for it is likely a far-fetched, illegitimate explanation for it, right? That doesn't mean that there aren't real bad actors in our society that are doing things to hurt us, right? We all probably share some concerns about the kinds of decisions that the current administration makes and how they impact our communities. And that isn't to say that nothing that gets reported or shared is legitimate, but we have to be very cautious about how things that are very far-fetched are likely to resonate with our communities, and that we need to be very careful about how we share them. Going a step further, we want to talk about hate. We've actually seen a massive uptick in hate speech and polarizing identity politics content flooding social media in the aftermath of the death of George Floyd and the protests against police brutality. This content has always been there, right? It's been there pretty much as long or longer than we've had this country. We've seen this massive uptick right now, and we see that uptick actively impacting the communities that we're most concerned about getting counted in the 2020 census. Whenever we see hateful content, we consider it problematic content that you ought to report. I'll jump through these other ones very quickly. We talked about pseudoscience a bit already. Anything that talks about unproven cures, anything that's skeptical about vaccines, either historically or about the upcoming coronavirus vaccine, climate change denial, these are all types of pseudoscience that we need to be cautious of. Anything that's old, and this is sometimes hard to recognize, but people frequently will share content that was relevant a month ago or a year ago today because it's relevant to the current context, but it may no longer mean the same thing. So thinking about content and investigating, is that a news article from this week or is that news article from 3 years ago? And how does that impact the meaning that it has? Thinking about content that's old or outdated is really critical. And then these last two are sort of come together. Anything that provides false promises, anything that's too good to be true probably is, right? That edge is as critical now as it ever was. And anything that looks like it might be a scam or fraud, asking for your personal information, offers you a deal, offers you to get something that should be harder to get. Those are all things that are putting our communities at risk, and we need to be vigilant about and report them. And for some reason, we don't see the rest of the slides here, but the other piece of text you should see that I think is really relevant is just because it is not outright false doesn't mean it's not problematic. And so that's something important to keep in mind. We use the frame problematic to talk about the work that we do. Most of the problematic content that we see is mis and disinformation. Hate speech is interlaced with mis and disinformation and is definitively problematic. So frequently the way that you can think about something is, do I think that this piece of information is problematic in some way? Will it mislead someone? Will it hurt someone? Does it create problems down the line? If it is problematic in that way, we think that you should report it. And so where do you go to find this content? We can go to the next slide. We think you need to monitor on the open social platforms that you consume content on, and in particular, the closed social platforms that you consume content on. So that means WhatsApp, WeChat, KakaoTalk, Facebook Messenger, other, your own text messaging groups that you have with your community. In particular, these closed messaging spaces are where problematic content can spread, and that disinformation researchers, journalists, officials, and other civil rights organizations don't necessarily have access to it. Only you can see it because it's your community. So when you identify content in those spaces, we think you should report it. In addition, we think you should be thinking about your network. So if on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook feed, there's that crazy uncle or that person you knew in high school that always shares the crackpot conspiracy theories or other problematic content, that's the place that you can look to identify, are they sharing content that relates to my community that I should be concerned about? Look, dig around and investigate, and then report if you see problematic content that they're sharing. So then we're going to jump to the last slide here. How do you do this? How do you report content? AAJC is collaborating with us on this tool that we've built called Junkipedia. And you can report content in a number of different ways. And what I'm going to ask you all to do right now, and I can't hear anyone or see anyone, so I don't know if you're actually doing it, but I hope you will. Pull out your mobile phone right now. Point the camera app of your mobile phone at this QR code that you see on the screen, and that will invite you to add the AAJC tip line to your phone address book. Once you've done that, and some of you it may work, some of you it may not, you can also just take a picture of the screen to do it later, and we'll certainly provide links afterward. But if you add that contact to your phone right now, you'll essentially have bookmarked these addresses that you see on the left. The web address, which is a form you can fill out, the SMS phone number, which you can text any piece of information to, and this email address. And once you've got those in your device, it should make it much easier for you to report content. And so I think I'm seeing that we're butting up against time here, so I might make the next part of this a little bit short, but I'll actually just describe it verbally. When you're looking at Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and you see something that's problematic on your device, you can click the share buttons that exist within any of those apps and say send via SMS. And if you've already added this contact to your mobile device, then you'll have a contact in your address book that's called the AAJC tip line. And so you can just click share, send via SMS, and start typing in AAJC, and it'll pre-populate with the AAJC tip line, and you can send a text. That text will be taken in by our system and will automatically be added to our database so that our colleagues at AAJC and the Leadership Conference and the Census Counts campaign are all able to access it so that we can evaluate it. The goal here is that we're trying to collect reports from all across the country and across all different communities and different languages so that we have better visibility into what kinds of problematic content are spreading. Having that situational awareness makes it easier for the various institutions that are trying to improve the quality of information to produce new messaging, to engage with newsrooms where necessary to get debunks and fact-checking articles written, to engage with the Census Bureau and the social media platforms directly to get them to remove or label problematic content. And it helps us to understand more broadly the trends that are happening in problematic content so that we can think proactively about efforts to mitigate that spread in the future. What we have recognized and what we have learned over the course of several years of trying to investigate and monitor mis and disinformation is that we can't see what you see. And so we need to work together in partnership and consider this effort to report mis and disinformation. We need to consider it a new civic responsibility. Just as we need to ensure that everyone is going out and getting counted in the census, just as later this year we'll need to work on getting out the vote and make sure everyone's vote is counted in a 2020 election. We need to be vigilant about and collaborate in the process of reporting problematic content when we see it. Because only if we work together to identify and stamp out the problem will we ever make a dent in it. So with that, I'm actually going to pause and stop for questions, because I think we've only got a little bit of time left, and I want to make sure we get to hear some of the voices from you all.
Hey everyone, as a reminder to ask questions, you can use the chat box or questions box and type in your question, or you can raise your hand to have your line unmuted to ask questions.
And I just wanted to note that Valerie said that she just grabbed the QR code and added it to her phone. So she said, thank you for making this an easy process to report junk.
Absolutely. If you want to hand off so I can share screen, I can open up the Junkipedia platform itself.
Sure.
So when problematic content gets shared into Junkipedia, and I'll be listening, please interrupt me if there are questions that come through. We take problematic content from a variety of different sources. Users can report it using each of the tip lines that you saw there. So via the web, via email, and via SMS. And I should also add that if you use WhatsApp and you add that QR code contact to your device, you'll also have an AAJC tip line contact within WhatsApp. So if you see problematic content in WhatsApp, you can click the forward button right in WhatsApp and say forward it to the AAJC tip line, and it will get added to the database as well. But so we have users from a wide range of organizations who are vigilantly monitoring problematic content across a number of domains. We have our own team of ethnic media reporting fellows who are actively monitoring closed networks within various languages, including Korean, Spanish, Mandarin, Tagalog, and one other I'm spacing on right this second, and are collecting mis and disinformation actively. But as I mentioned, we want to expand that to bring all of you in there. So someone asks, are there some Facebook sites or Twitter feeds we should pay close attention to? There are, everyone has a different feed, right? So there are Facebook feeds and Twitter feeds that we pay close attention to because they're the ones that we know. I should add that I speak English and I happen to speak Greek, but I do not speak Spanish and I do not speak Mandarin and I do not speak Chinese or Hindi or Vietnamese or Japanese. And so I don't know which feeds there are in other languages in particular to pay attention to. Within each community, those are likely to be on different platforms and likely to be in different languages that are your own language. And so one of the bits of advice that we often give for how do you figure out what you should pay attention to is to start with things that you know are bad, right? So for example, we know that the Pizzagate conspiracy theory is bad. We know that for anyone who saw it a couple of weeks ago, the Plandemic conspiracy theory and related video is bad and it's spreading bad information. There's various news stories that have covered that. If you can find places where that kind of problematic content is spread in the past, so it doesn't have to be about the census, right? It can be problematic content about something else. Someone, I think someone shared recently the president voting is likely to be rife with fraud. Sorry, can you guys, yeah, you can still hear me. Mail-in voting is likely to be rife with fraud. Others who share that kind of message are likely to share other types of problematic content messages in the future. So starting with looking for problematic content that people are sharing about one subject is a good place to be monitoring and vigilant for where they might be sharing other problematic content in the future. Are there any other questions? I think that we've sort of covered far enough, and I know we wanted to wrap up in a few minutes. We're at 5:11 now, so you guys let me know.
Yeah, no worries. Cameron, I just sent you another question. I can read it aloud if you want.
Yep, yeah. So I see. Oh, what's common disinformation you've seen circulated in immigrant communities or communities of color in regard to the census? Who's behind them? So we focused on one of the prime examples that we saw, which was the Home Affairs hoax. We saw the Home Affairs hoax translated. Originally, it appeared in English. We saw it translated into Mandarin. We saw it translated into Korean. We saw it translated into Spanish, at least. And that spread repeatedly. And we don't know what's behind the original version of it. You know, we think sometimes bad information spreads accidentally, right? And so after the first person saw it, they saw it and they thought, oh, I don't want my community to get hurt. Let me notify them, right? So if you saw on a local message board, you know, there's a car with tinted glass driving around and it looks suspicious to me, and someone then sees that, they might share with other people, hey, yeah, there's, you know, some bad actor in the neighborhood. There may be no one doing anything bad in that car, but because you want to alert people to something that is a potential risk to them, you're going to let them know. In the past, we have seen, frankly, lots and lots of problematic content spreading about ICE raids, right? So the idea that there are ICE raids happening in this place at this time, one person says it, everyone gets scared and starts sharing with everyone else. There may not be an ICE raid at all. Nonetheless, that kind of problematic content gets spread widely because people are doing it with the best of intentions. In the context of the census in particular, I think we also saw versions of, if you share your information with the Census Bureau, it could be shared with ICE, right? So thinking specifically about the undocumented immigrant case. In addition, we saw various communities sharing what is purely misinformation. I don't think there was ever spread maliciously, but people misunderstanding the deadline of the census, right? The census promoted Census Day, April 1st, right? And I think there's some confusion there because we have another day that we talk about a lot, Tax Day, right? Tax Day is April 15th. Tax Day is definitively the deadline. So I think that a lot of people were confused by the Census Day language of April 1st for Census Day, and a lot of people were communicating and sharing in their own communities in their own languages. Today's the deadline. April 1st is the last day to fill out the census, even when it was really almost the 1st.
Great. Thank you so much, Cameron. We have one more question, and it's from Cordell. Cordell, I'm going to unmute you.
All righty. Thank you all. I'm doing a lot of advocacy in the Black community, and a big thing that comes up a lot is with the history of Black people in the census count, you know, with like the 3/5 compromise and stuff, and with the fact that our community has been disinvested in. My question is, how do you handle when people are strongly asserting that the census doesn't fund the 132 different agencies like, you know, Medicare, Medicaid, WIC and all that stuff? How do you, like, the big thing, the obstacle I come to is I've been asked to explain the methodology, which I can show them the final number and everything, but like, it's not really necessarily misinformation, but a lot of people are just basically saying don't do the census because it never helps out Black people. So I'm just curious, how would I like concisely explain the methodology without like sending in a PDF?
That is a tough question, right? I don't know which organization you're with, but obviously I would reach out to the folks at Color of Change because I think that they spend a lot of time thinking about this particular challenge of communication, and they're one of the partners in this work that we do. And so they might have some specific advice or talking points to counteract that the message that you're dealing with. I think that one of the ways that it's valuable to communicate, I should just say my background is as a journalist. I spent a long time telling stories, and I think that stories and personalizing the way that these kinds of abstract concepts like the census and federal spending work are one of the more effective ways to do it. I know one of the early examples that I saw that I thought was persuasive, and it's not the perfect for your use case, but nonetheless I think is valuable, is to say that the census is the mechanism by which we know how many people there are in a place. And so the people whose responsibility it is to design disaster evacuation plans need accurate data about the census in order to craft how you develop evacuation routes, in order to determine where we pre-position supplies for, medical supplies and, food and water supplies and, the buses that get people out of different places and things like that, right? And I think you could point to, some of the failures, for example, that I know, like that are still ever present in my memory about Hurricane Katrina and the disaster that it was evacuating the community in New Orleans. And not that the census was necessarily going to solve that problem, but recognizing that this census data has real life impacts, right? One of them is about the money, another one is about the apportionment, and another one is about our daily lives and all of the things that our government does to ensure that our society functions and is safe. And so thinking about the various specific stories that you can say, census data does this thing, and don't you want it to be accurate so that you're safe? I've always found that to be an effective message.
Thank you. That was the Katrina one is a perfect one instead of talking numbers. So thank you.
Great. Does anyone have any more questions for Cam before we wrap up?
Well, thank you guys so much. I just want to add my colleagues, Karishma and Caitlin, are on here. We sort of entered into a time crunch because I wanted to give them an opportunity to chat and introduce them, but know that all three of us are available, and I think you're going to get shared all of our contact information. If anyone has problems accessing or using the tool or wants a follow-up training for their community, we are happy to do that. And so we would love to make our team accessible to you whenever you need it. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is a list of all of our speakers today and their contact information. And again, we'll be sending out a recording link and a copy of this presentation to everyone who joined us. So thank you so much, Cameron, Caitlin, and Krishna for being on, and for all the folks who tuned in today.
Thank you.